Awareness without compassion is a playground for shame, and shame left unchecked is the great interrupter of learning and growing, of living into our courage, and ultimately of showing up in community in a way that nurtures deep belonging. Welcome to Oxygen for Educators. I'm one of your hosts, Michelle Kinder. It's our hope to bring you thought-provoking, unscripted conversations full of actionable ideas to fuel your important work in the world. Thanks for tuning in. This space is for you. Hi, everyone. Welcome back. In our very first episode of this series, Radical Hope: Inner Work with a Ripple Effect, we shared our belief that radical hope doesn't ask you to ignore reality. It asks you to believe that you are part of shaping what comes next. For this episode, we're going to take a moment to pause and really look back at the terrain that we've traveled in this series, to step back and pay attention to the architecture that's underneath the practices we've been building. So don't think of it like a recap. It's more of a 30,000-foot view, a way to kind of look into the patterns that keep surfacing and what ideas are echoing across episodes. From that 30,000-foot view, each concept that we've explored, from befriending the nervous system to self-compassion to attention management for mental health, all of the episodes, all 8 of them, point to the same deeper invitation, which is that inner work is how we protect what's most human in us. And when we practice it over time, we begin to create the conditions for something even larger, a collective steadiness, shared hope, and the kind of connection that can change how we move through the world. So today, I want to name 5 patterns or 5 through lines, our first 8 episodes identified, that in essence form the foundation of radical hope. The first is that safety is in the soil. Every practice we've explored begins with a sense of nervous system safety, not just the absence of threat, but a felt sense of being seen, known, understood, held psychologically, physiologically, emotionally, relationally. When we talk about hope or creativity or compassion, it's easy to forget that none of those things are available to a nervous system that doesn't feel safe. The body has to believe we're safe before the mind can imagine what's possible. So safety is the soil everything else grows in. When we're hijacked into the red dorsal vagal shutdown zone or the yellow sympathetic fight or flight zone, our chief preoccupation is survival, and everything that we do, say, feel, and think is shaped by that primal response. When we're in the green zone of ventral vagal safety and connection, we're creating, connecting, and we're remembering who we actually are. Safety lets us come back home to ourselves. And from that home base, we can engage the world differently. So take a breath, if you will, and just inquire, what helps me feel safe enough to stay open? Is it time in nature, a morning ritual, maybe a voice that calms me, or a boundary that protects me? Whatever comes to mind when you ask yourself what helps you feel safe enough to stay open, to stay open-hearted, whatever comes to mind, I hope that you have come to believe that it is not a luxury or something to shoehorn into your schedule. It's a critical foundational need. So if safety is the soil, the second through line that I want to explore is that awareness can be our compass. Being in relationship with intentional self-reflection leads to self-awareness, which gives us a tangible way to live in service of our nervous systems, and specifically knowing what it is that helps us feel safe and connected and what it is that puts us into a survival state. It's learning to pause and notice, where am I on Deb Dana's ladder right now? Am I safe and connected at the top? Am I mobilized into fight or flight in the middle of the ladder? Or am I immobilized into shutdown at the bottom of the ladder? Do I have just the right amount of energy flowing through me? Or do I feel manic and spinny, a little too much energy? Maybe a little too little energy, like I might feel like my body is moving through molasses just to get the basics done in a day. That tiny act of noticing changes everything, because what we notice, we can name, and what we name, we can move toward or move away from, depending on how it's impacting our sense of safety and our groundedness. Awareness acts as a compass. It helps us steer how we experience our lives instead of drifting and feeling powerless as if life is just happening to us. I'll remind us of Viktor Frankl's quote, "Between stimulus and response is our power to choose." It's that quiet moment between trigger and choice. That is the space where agency lives. With self-awareness, we can lengthen that pause between stimulus and response, and we can strengthen our ability to respond in a manner that serves us and the people around us. In the first 8 Radical Hope episodes, we saw this play out in so many forms, of recognizing the inner critic instead of just blindly obeying her, managing our attention in service of our mental health, and noticing when a coping strategy stops working and being comfortable replacing it with something else. Those are just a few examples. What awareness does is it offers us orientation and it offers us agency. So think of a recent moment when you realized, oh my gosh, I'm in the middle of the ladder. I'm in fight or flight right now. Or maybe you realized, geez, I'm being so hard on myself. Think about that and ask yourself the question, what shifted in the light of your awareness? What shifted the instant you noticed and named what was maybe driving you under the level of awareness? What shifted when you brought that thing into your awareness? That reflection, noticing what you noticed and noticing the impact it had on you after you noticed and named it, that's awareness doing its quiet work. So we've covered 2, safety as the soil, awareness as the compass. And the third through line from our Radical Hope episodes is that compassion is the bridge. Awareness without compassion just turns into self-surveillance. We're just gathering more information to beat ourselves up about. But when we pair the two, something borderline holy can happen. Compassion takes that knowing that we experience from developing our awareness muscle, and it creates the conditions for healing. But that only happens when you pair awareness and compassion. Awareness by itself won't do it. Compassion outside of awareness won't do it. It's the combination of awareness and compassion that create the best conditions for healing. Compassion is how we stay tender with what we find in our growing awareness. And as we learned from Kristen Neff, tender self-compassion might say something like, "Of course you're exhausted. Anyone would be." But she also invites us to light up our fierce self-compassion. That tender self-compassion helps us hold what we notice without judgment. And the fierce self-compassion fuels us to do something about it. It might say something like, "And now it's time to fill in the blank, rest, speak up, make a change," whatever that ends up being that advocates for your own well-being. So we need both. We need the tender, we need the fierce. We need the soft hand on the heart, we need the strong hand on the boundary. And compassion protects us from the inevitable shame spirals that can intensify when we get more self-reflective and self-aware, which then pushes people away from habits of self-reflection and self-awareness because it feels bad when you don't pair it with compassion. When you pair it with compassion, it feels tender, it feels safe. Awareness without compassion is a playground for shame, and shame left unchecked is the great interrupter of learning and growing, of living into our courage, and ultimately of showing up in community in a way that nurtures deep belonging. In the context of radical hope, compassion isn't indulgence, it's maintenance. It's how we keep our systems well enough to keep showing up. So ask yourself maybe where in your life is tenderness needed right now? And counterpoint, where is fierceness needed? That voice that might say, "No more," or "This matters too much to keep ignoring." Showing up for ourselves and others from a posture of both tender and fierce compassion. I'm searching for what I want to say here. It's like it balloons our capacity out into like 360. If we're just leaning into tender compassion, it's like half of our balloon is inflated, the other half is kind of losing air. Same if we're just leaning into the fierce. If we can nurture our capacity for both tender and fierce, then you can picture that mylar balloon fully inflated all the way around. Okay, 2 more. So far, we've covered safety is the soil, awareness is the compass, compassion is the bridge. And our fourth through line is that flexibility allows for flow. That is what keeps everything moving. Rigid systems break. Flexible ones bend and return. That's true for ecosystems, for schools, for nervous systems, for people. Coping flexibility is that ability to say, "This strategy used to work for me, but it's not working right now. So maybe it's time to try something new." It's the opposite of that push harder voice that so many of us have reinforced through school and through leadership. Flexibility lets us pivot in real time based on the current state of affairs. And there's infinite hope in that, in understanding that we can adapt in whatever ways serve our nervous systems and our communities. Maybe you need more community time, but maybe more alone time. Maybe you need fiction. Maybe you need self-help. What is it that will serve you right now? And are you flexible enough to lean toward that, even if it's new and surprising? It's essentially meeting the moment instead of demanding that the moment meet us. I'm going to pay attention to the cues around me. And my North Star is, what is it that's going to help me stay in a safe and connected, regulated nervous system so that I can show up as my truest, most powerful self in my community. If those are your kind of guideposts, and you're willing to be flexible, there's so much energy in the experience. When you think about the nervous system perspective, flexibility is literally resilience, that capacity to move fluidly up and down the ladder between states rather than getting stuck in a survival state. The capacity to mobilize when there is a challenge, but then return to safety and connection when the challenge passes instead of getting locked into that survival state day in and day out. In a world that keeps changing faster than we can plan, flexibility as a skill and as a commitment is going to become a more and more dramatic differentiator. General Eric Shinseki says, if you don't like change, you will like irrelevance even less. I read this as an invitation to embrace flexibility and adaptability. Staying relevant is about continuous adaptation, innovation, and growth, especially in the face of constant uncertainty. For educators and leaders, that's especially true. Relevance has never been about chasing trends. It's about staying alive to the changing needs of the students, your teams, and of course, always at the core of it, yourselves. Becoming rigid or resisting change can lead us into essentially a status quo trap where we as individuals or organizations fail to tell ourselves the truthiest truth about our current situation and fail to adapt to the new demands or new scenarios. A commitment to flexibility can feel like play. It can feel like freedom. So ask yourself, where in your life are you being invited to loosen your grip? Is there something that you've been insisting must be a certain way? And how punishing is that to your own nervous system and to the people around you? If you freed yourself from the assumptions of what should happen and gave yourself permission to do what most served you and your community, what would you do differently? What would you do differently today? What would you do differently tomorrow? What would you do differently next year? Okay, last and final through line for this episode. Just to kind of remind you of our first four, we have safety as the soil, awareness as the compass, compassion as the bridge, flexibility as the flow. And for our fifth through line, we're going to think about attention as the architect. Attention as architect designs what happens in our lives, whether we are aware of it or not. You may have heard the sayings, where our attention goes, our energy follows, or what you pay attention to expands. There's a number of sayings that kind of get at the same thing. And we have to tell ourselves the truth about the fact that increasingly and exponentially, we're living in a world that profits from our distraction and our dysregulation. Period. End of sentence. Deciding who and what get your attention has become a sacred act of reclamation. Attention management is about presence, and it's about choosing. It's asking, what is it that deserves the most precious resource I have, my focus, my attention, my finite energy? And if we fail to answer with intention and explore these questions with intention, those profiting from our distraction and our dysregulation, they will answer for us. So it's either we step in and be intentional, or we get swept by the cultural norms, which are not in service of our attention or our regulated nervous system. So I want to introduce again the 3 discernment questions from Suzanne Stabile, because these are helpful to us in deciding where our attention goes. Her discernment questions are: number 1, what is mine to do? What is not mine to do? Number 2, what is mine to say? What is not mine to say? And number 3, what is mine to care about? And what is not mine to care about? Some other favorite questions that help us manage our attention in service of our mental health: is this helping or hurting me? Will this matter in 10 years? If I was tracking on the fact that I won't live forever, would this thing or this person get my finite time and attention? Those questions help drive our attention toward what we most care about. Attention is how we build a life aligned with our values instead of one shaped by noise. It's how we stop chasing what's urgent and start tending to what's essential. And the amount of joy and peace that is available to us when we are living our lives in service of what we have determined is essential is off the charts. So ask yourself, if someone looked at your week, what would they assume you value most? And what one small shift could bring your calendar closer to the life you want? Remember, your attention is like a flashlight. There are so many things in our modern world insisting 24/7 that you point the flashlight in their direction. But the flashlight is in your hand. Attention as the architect is remembering that the flashlight is in your hand. You decide where to point it, and where you point it shapes your experiences, and your experiences naturally shape your life. So when we step back from these 5 through lines, we start to see an even simpler pattern underneath them all, a kind of rhythm that inner work tends to follow. In the first 8 episodes of this series, 4 verbs keep showing up. And I'm going to put them on a Post-it note in my office as a reminder. The 4 verbs for fun, also, they start with R: regulate, reflect, reorient, and re-engage. We regulate our nervous systems to find that steadiness. We are in constant reflection mode to gather awareness, to assess for meaning. We reorient our attention and our energy toward our values. And then we re-engage with the world and the causes we care about, from that centered, grounded, and resourced place. It's that cycle that repeats endlessly. It's not a checklist to complete, and every single moment is an invitation to return home to ourselves and return home to our communities. So, radical hope is not a feeling that we chase. It's a rhythm we practice. It's a way of living that makes us more available to the truth and to each other. Something else becomes clear when you zoom out. Inner work doesn't end with the individual. It's the pre-work for connection with the collective. Every time one person regulates their nervous system, it changes them, of course, but it also changes the field around them because our nervous systems are contagious. Every time someone practices compassion, it gives permission for others to do the same. We prepare to show up in community through our inner work, and ultimately we heal in community. When you tend to your nervous system, you're not just protecting yourself, you're creating safety cues for everyone in your orbit. Your calm becomes someone else's permission to care for themselves. Your boundaries become someone else's model of dignity, and your hope becomes contagious. That's why we call the series Inner Work with a Ripple Effect. Up until now, this Radical Hope series has been about cultivating an internal ecosystem strong enough to hold complexity, to meet the world as it is without collapsing or turning away. The next several episodes will focus on connection as a protective factor. We'll explore how our nervous systems find safety together, how co-regulation can restore us when individual resilience runs thin. We'll talk about belonging as medicine, about relationships as anchors, and about how collective imagination helps us build futures that are kinder and more inclusive. Inner steadiness is what we focused on so far. Inner steadiness prepares us for relational depth. And to make it extra fun, it's that relational depth that gives that inner steadiness purpose and expression. So just to review, safety is the soil, awareness is the compass, compassion is the bridge, flexibility is the flow, and attention is the architect. Each one strengthens the others. Together, they form that architecture of radical hope, and they give us a way to stay steady even when everything is changing and shaky all around us. So we do this work in service of our own nervous system. We do this work for the people we love, and we do this work for the collective that we're all a part of. None of us was ever meant to carry hope alone. So each time that we practice this inner work and this collective work, we're protecting our own capacity. We're expanding what's possible for the people around us and the causes we care about. So that is our 30,000 foot recap of what we've done so far in the series. Thank you so much for tuning in. Do us a favor and make sure you're subscribed so you will always be notified when there's a new episode. And please share a favorite conversation with your network. We would be so grateful to you if you have found anything in this podcast, the conversations, the interviews, the Radical Hope series. If you would share it with other educators so that we can just keep building our community, that would be an amazing gift to us. I also want to let you know you can sign up for a complimentary subscription to the new Oxygen for Educators magazine. If you'll check the show notes for how to do that, we would love for you to have the nuggets that are coming up in our conversations with amazing educators in the permanence of print. That is why we are doing an extension magazine from the podcast. Wishing you a truly lovely week, and we will see you next time. Thanks for joining us for this episode of Oxygen for Educators. Please like, share, and follow, and if inclined, leave us a 5-star review so that we can keep making content for you. Let us hear from you if you know someone we should interview or a topic we should cover.
The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are those of the guest and host and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of any organization. The content is provided for informational and educational purposes only and is not intended as professional advice. Listeners are encouraged to use their own judgment and seek appropriate professional support when needed. Oxygen for Educators, its host, and production partners are not responsible for any actions taken based on the information shared in this podcast.